بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome back, dear viewers. The last time we spoke, I was at Medina Munawwara, the most beautiful city in the world, the illuminated city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the most blessed land in the world. And we had started this mini series where we covered the soul of tarbiyah. And we covered two of our points. The first one was al-muhabba wal-ma'rifa, meaning the love and recognition of Allah and Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second, which we elaborated while in Medina, was at-tashakhus wal-abdiyya, the self-identity, knowing the self, and servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That meant knowing what it means to be a Muslim. How is a Muslim expected to behave, to live? And what is the ummah? What is the concept of the ummah? And why it is so necessary to develop the ummah and strengthen the ummah, strengthen those bonds, and what it means to be part of the ummah, and who all is part of the ummah. So this was our second point. And now today we will cover our third point, which we call al-azma wal-hurma. The having in our heart the grandeur or the magnanimity of the symbols of Islam and the symbols of Islam, and also having understanding their sacredness, their sacrosanctity. That is what is intended from this point, that this comes into our children's hearts. And it will not come into our children's hearts just by words and lectures. It has to be modeled, and it has to come into our environment. We have to develop such an environment so our children do take this up and absorb it into their hearts and their minds. As we know, as Maria Montessori said, that the child has an absorbent mind. So anything that is within the atmosphere, within the environment, is what the child absorbs. And among the symbols of Islam, the sha'airul Islam that we should initially have our children, some basic sha'air that Islam is recognized by, we should ensure that our children have their greatness and their grandeur in their heart, as well as their sanctity. The first and foremost is the masjid. So the masjid is sacrosanct. The masjid is pure. The masjid is to be honored. The masjid is the house of Allah. So its association with Allah allows us to open our hearts for its grandeur. And so going to the masjid basically means going to meet Allah. And to have that feeling in the heart is what we intend from this love and honor for the masjid. The point that we really need to understand is that this means all masjids in the world, every single masjid. وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. All masjids belong to Allah, and do not call upon anyone other than Allah. So along with the masjid, then we have Azaan. Azaan is associated with the masjid. So the call towards Allah, call towards worship of Allah, is something that needs to be sacrosanct. I remember when we were children, there was a general atmosphere that when Adhan would take place, all the children would come back, especially Maghrib Adhan, they would come back inside home, and everyone would listen to the Adhan carefully. And women would, even inside their homes, they would cover their heads and as a show of respect and honor. And everyone would silently listen to the Adhan. I remember one event that happened in my life. It was quite hilarious actually when you look back at it, but it's also very touching. And I realized how touching and how beautiful that moment was several years later when I grew up. When I was a child, we attended a wedding in Pakistan, and during the wedding there was this concert of sorts, very traditional sort, where this lady, she was reciting poetry. We call it a ghazal. Basically, it is a song recited, it's poetry recited in song, and there's musical instruments and everything. So it's basically a musical night. And while I'm sitting there and I'm just a little kid, the Isha Azaan took place. And it was so, it's etched in my memory, that scene, because you could see women who had their dupattas, they had their, their shawls, they would start covering their head. And there are some women who didn't have anything to cover their head. Literally, they covered their heads with tablecloths. They had tables left, right, and they moved under the table and covered their head with tablecloth just for the sake of the adhan. And then there were these young ladies, these girls basically, and what I found the funniest was that some of them grabbed plates and placed those plates on their heads. So you reflect on that, and I mean, it seems funny, but then you think how beautiful that is. It's because of the love of Allah and the azama, the ta'zeem of Allah, holding Allah as supreme, holding His grandeur and magnanimity in their hearts, is what prompted them to do that. In retrospect, it's a very powerful sign of their commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if their practice was very weak. So this is what inspired me, that when we raise our children, we ensure that they honor these symbols of Islam. This is what keeps you humble. This is what keeps you attached to Allah. Along with these are Al-Haramain Al-Sharifain, so the Haram of Makkah, the Haram of Medina, and Masjid Aqsa, the third of our harams, that all three of these harams have great position in our hearts. And we long for them, and we long to be there. And they're almost like a magical environment. I use the term loosely, of course, but that the spirituality of those places should be so overwhelming that our children would desire and long to be there, to see them, and have this distant spiritual attachment to these places. So these are the three most sanctified places on earth, and they should be recognized as such by our children. Next is the month of Ramadan. So not only physical places or the call to adhan, but a time period as well. The entire month of Ramadan is sacrosanct. Its sanctity its holiness is well known. So it's not just about those who are fasting, because most of our children, the little ones, they're not supposed to be fasting. They're not obligated to be fasting. So what should they be doing? Well, they should honor the fast. How? Well, if they're eating, they're drinking, then they do it separately. So one thing is the fast of Ramadan, and another thing is the ta'zeem of Ramadan, of holding it, the tahreem of Ramadan, holding it sacred, holding it holy. So those are two different things, and both things are important. Fasting is for those who are adults now. They've passed adolescence. But for little children, even though fasting is not prescribed for them, still the environment of Ramadan is something they need to be conscious of. And then the sacrificial animal for Eid al-Adha. So the Eid al-Adha itself is sacred, and the animal is sacred. So when we bring the animal, we should treat it as something special, feeding it, looking after it. Our children should be looking after these animals and taking them out for walks and feeding them and making sure they're safe from rain or cold or heat, and their needs are fulfilled. So this is something else that develops a strong bond of what is sacred in Islam for them. What comes next is the sunnah appearance, the sunnah dress and the sunnah appearance, males and females, whether that's hijab, niqab, whether that's the beard, the amama, the jubba, the thawb, or the qamis, any of these items of clothing or appearance that represent Islam. So I feel more important than our children wearing these clothes is that they honor those who wear these clothes. So the honor and dignity of these clothes is something more important to them. And this is what leads them to acquire that appearance as well. Sometimes we compel them towards the appearance, but they don't really have its dignity and its sanctity in their heart, so they give it up after when they grow up. So that doesn't work too well. But if they have the sanctity in the heart, they will acquire it when they are ready for it. And we saw this in Turkey, I should say instead. In Turkey, we went there in 2012, and we were not aware of what the culture over there would be, because we had known about the secularist and the Kemalist regimes and the 70 years of oppression that Muslims went through over there, and their culture was eradicated to a certain extent. But they could not rip out the honor and dignity and sanctity of the symbols of Islam from the hearts of the people. And the reason for that was the people, they conveyed this legacy to their children in their tarbiyah. So the children were very well raised. Their upbringing was something special that we saw. The way they would honor guests, the way they would... Now children would come up to us, run up to us and kiss our hands. Hojalar geldiler, they would think that we are special people just because we had beards, we had... our heads were covered, and we were wearing, long coats, jubbas, etc. So this inspired them to come and greet us. And that was so heartwarming, because you don't see that even in Pakistan, where people do adopt this dress, but they are not honored in the same way. In fact, if anything, they are discredited or disregarded. They're even humiliated. They're called slurs in order to put them down. If you have a beard, if you're wearing, burqa, etc., you're put down a certain way. So rather than raising and elevating their status, because they are representing the outward appearance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the honored people, the general populace puts it down. So this is what we want to reverse. Another thing that we need to inculcate the greatness and sanctity in their hearts of our children is the sources of knowledge. Quran itself is the greatest source of knowledge. The Arabic language and anything associated with it. Learning materials, especially, Montessori learning material. Maria Montessori, she incorporated this, that if they honor the material, then they will be able to honor learning and knowledge, and that's how they will gain knowledge. All books, especially Islamic books, but books written in any language, deserve to be honored and deserve to be treated properly. Pens, pencils, stationery. So all of these things are to be honored. We shouldn't use it for other purposes other than to acquire knowledge. Then there's special people in society that are to be honored. The most special people are parents, of course. So the honor and sanctity of our parents, and by the extension, the honor and sanctity of our grandparents, our other elders. Then there's our teachers, our elders, scholars, professors, religious scholars, pious people, the sulaha, the ulama. Then our children learn to honor them. As Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that those who do not honor the elders, the elderly, and the scholars, and the just rulers, they're not from among us. And honoring these three people is akin to honoring Allah Azza wa Jal. So this honor and sanctity of these special people is something we need to strive. And one thing we have to remember, that's all scholars, all religious scholars, regardless of what school of thought you might prescribe to, that does not preclude you from honoring all scholars. And that's what we should teach our children. Say, there's an example. If a Quran has been printed wrongly, there's a misprint, and we don't know if the printing is correct or not, then even if we don't read from it, we would still place it honorably. We would touch it after ablution, after wudu. Even if we don't read from it or benefit from it, we will still honor it. Similarly, if there's a scholar, he doesn't have the amal, the deeds to back up his knowledge, or you might disagree with his knowledge, you might have disagreements, that still does not mean that you have the right to dishonor the scholar. just because they're a scholar, they deserve to be honored. So let's raise our children along these lines. Will help eliminate a lot of sectarianism, a lot of tensions within the ummah, if we learn to honor each other, and if these shair of Islam, this azama and hurma, comes into our children's hearts, we would really be successful in raising beautiful human beings, inshallah.